He's a jazz pianist.
So maybe we want to start off
Yeah.
with some like ground rules, because I was gonna ask you about things like gender and
Go for it. I don't mind talking
Yeah?
about things now.
how do people talk about this
Mm-hmm.
in a way that's like respectful to you
Oh,
and
Yeah.
in a way that's disrespectful.
okay. Disrespectful. I'll start with that because it's the same as like anyone, right? I think you wouldn't go up to someone and say, "Are you a he?
Oh yeah.
Are you a?"
Like
I had my
somebody.
like my boss. He came up to me. Are you a he? Would you say that to anyone? Like that's a really weird thing to say, and so you're showing that you assumed. Like, Freddie, are you a he? I've already decided that I think you're a he. What if I'm wrong? And it's kind of like, so it's not like talking to anyone else, you know? You wouldn't ask a weird question like that, phrased kind of weirdly. You wouldn't come up and say, have you had the surgeries? Remember what you're asking about, please, you know? You wouldn't, like, see someone on the street and, you know, stop them and ask, you know? And it's not something you would bring up unless we're talking about it. And right now we're having a discussion about it. So I think there's not much you can do to be disrespectful because you're coming from a place of curiosity. I think the things that show respect for a person is like not deciding for yourself who they are before you talk to them.
Yeah.
But again, that's just like basic human things, right?
Yeah.
So it's about just like talking to trans people like you would talk to anyone else. I think there's a lot of vocabulary people feel like they have to know. Like, we have an whole acronym and you have to know what dysphoria is and coming out. And it's just a human experience, you know? You look in the mirror and you think something's not right. And then you take steps. I don't know. Have you ever felt like you don't know how to approach a trans person? Like, is it...
No, but in general, I felt sometimes afraid to ask certain questions, not just around trans people, but around, like, for instance, like I was in Serbia, and I was like, I'm curious about, like, history, but it's a little bit controversial, and I wanted to ask, like, Serbian people about their opinion, and I was a bit afraid. And I think it's similar because it's something that some of them also want to talk about, but some of them don't. And if you don't know anything about it, you probably don't really know the right way to talk about it. Right?
Totally.
And I don't know many trans people, so I'm not that familiar with it either.
I mean, if you're going to be like curious about something that you don't know much about, pretend like perchance it's trans people, perchance it's Serbian history. You know, you do a little bit of research beforehand. Check out the Human Rights Campaign website. I sent that to all of my family. And you know, you just do a little bit of research beforehand, and or you come into the conversation and say like, hey, I don't really know how to talk about this, but I'm curious about blank. And I think if it's someone you know well, like we've been talking for a few weeks, I don't think there's much disrespectful you can do, unless you turn out to suddenly be a terrible person in the next few minutes of the podcast, but
Just
I don't.
wait.
Yeah, just wait. Yeah.
The sun's gonna go down.
Yeah,
The
claws are
candles
coming
gonna
out.
light.
Do you have a question you're worried about being disrespectful, or a question that you want to ask? That
Well, I guess, for me, it would be interesting to start, hearing a little bit about your journey, why,
Yeah.
Maybe whether you would say, maybe one question is whether you would say you were always a man,
Oh, yeah.
or whether you became a man, or and why.
I just remembered I wore a skirt to this podcast. People are like, when did you, surprise. No. I think there's a thing, right, where for something to be real, you've had to know it your whole life. I don't really think that's true, I don't think that was true with me. When I was 3 or 4, I wasn't having gender thoughts, and this might be because my parents were really good parents. They didn't force me into skirts or dresses that often, and when they did, I didn't really mind it either. I think it was more a matter of just schools went into lockdown, and I was living in my bedroom, on online school, and I realized I wanted to go back to school, something different, which seems a little bit weird, but I think when people talk about being trans, they're like, I knew when I was a child and I thought a lot about my decision, and I really want to tell you that, and that's not true. I kind of woke up one day, I was like, I think this is the thing that needs to happen.
Well,
and I think it was 13 or 14 years old that I kind of mentioned to my mom that I was pretty uncomfortable with how I was physically growing, and I know puberty sucks for everyone, but for me, I was genuinely confused as to why it was happening the way it was. I was like, this isn't what it was supposed to happen. And I just had a lot of great people in my life, lots of good counselors, doctors and stuff, and therapists who I just kind of, over the course of the past 5 years, slow meandering journey to whatever the heck is happening now. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, that's thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I think there's an image of trans people that's a before picture and an after picture, and I think that's really silly. Nobody's a before picture and an after picture, really. I don't know. You'd see a picture of yourself when you're 14 and Freddie now.
Yeah, it's a before and after, but before and after what? Yeah,
and
something's changing.
And enough time passes, when you're a kid, to, I'm not going to claim to be an adult. I'm 19, but from when you're preteen, so wise. No, from being a preteen to however now, anybody looks different, and for me, sure, that means that maybe I've gone through sort of a gender transition, but if anything, I've become so much less interested in gender than I was when I was 13 or 14.
Yeah, because you answered the questions for yourself.
Yeah, totally. And I think you become less self-absorbed maybe after adolescence, everything revolves around you. I don't know.
Yeah, and you also were talking, this is jumping, and we're probably gonna jump back.
We can jump.
But you were talking to me about naivety, and you were you say, I feel like a naive person. You say I often feel I'm doubting myself and the things I know. Yeah. But then at the same time, I mean, you did just say it was a maneuvering path, but at the same time, you did make you had quite a bit of certainty at a young age.
Yeah. I think it was more naivety about really wanting to be understood by people, and I thought people would understand me if I was I want to be a masculine guy, and I knew this was what I was when I was little, and that makes sense to people, right? Because then that's grounds to transition. And I think I was really naive in that I just really wanted to be understood by people who didn't care to think very much about me. I just wanted to be like, this is what I am, and I just want you to get it right, and I'm gonna dress in a way that people recognize as being masculine, and I just want to be easy for people. It didn't last long. Yeah. At a certain point, I just was like, what's the point of transitioning or doing anything you want in your life, making a change? It's just being happy.
So almost you wanted to like grab on to a masculine identity, almost to show other people, look, I have this masculine identity. But then you realized it was a little bit more about the showing, and then you realize, okay, now you're more like flowing. Yeah. And you some days sometimes your masculine side comes out, and other times it doesn't come out. Or
Do you feel that you ever were putting on like a masculinity that was easy for other people to understand? Because I've talked to a lot of people who aren't trans, and I think they have similar things happen to them.
I think for me it was more like, it wasn't about being masculine as much as like wanting to be attractive to women. And I thought, what do women like? Well, they like these things. Yeah. And one thing that actually got me over that was having girlfriends who were bi. And I was well, if they can like women for female things, then clearly it's not masculinity that they're attracted to. It's me that they're
fascinating.
Attracted to. Yeah. So
it was about being appealing to other people. Yeah. I think that's similar to maybe what I was feeling, is just the desire for other people to like want or understand you. I think it's overrated. Or rather, like you said about dating women who are bi, or finding people who understand you for just being you, and they're not trying to put you in a box that you're not into.
Yeah, exactly. You have these I had these experiences where I just felt appreciated, not judged, loved, and then I was like, well, then maybe I had already accepted myself on the inside, but then I was accepting myself also on the outside more. What's something like that you were putting on a guise of that you realized you didn't need to be attractive? Maybe how about that? Yeah, like when you felt freed up. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, like I got rid of the, like, I still wanted to be liked and stuff, but I felt like, because you're a human being. But I felt like, oh, now I know that I'm likable, so I can stop trying. So I lost interest in like learning how to talk to people. Yeah. Right. Or looking at others and asking like, what did they do? And because it's also for a number of reasons, it's a dangerous road to go down. Yeah. But like, for instance, like you can look at guys who are attractive to girls, right? And you can see that, oh, they do these things, and oh, those are not nice things to do. Yeah. But if you're really dumb or normal or whatever, naive. Or naive, keyword of the podcast. You think maybe even those are the likable things, like maybe the fact that they're not treating women right. Lots of people still believe that lots of like men still believe that women like to not be treated right, because they see like hot guys not treating women right. They've been shown. Right? Yeah. And I mean, I can't say that's not true, but I can definitely say that I think I treat women right, and they still like me. Yeah. So it's not about that. Miraculously, it's not about that at all. Yeah. I think it was, going back to something you said, was like looking at people and seeing it worked for them. I had a similar experience, like with being trans. I'd see maybe these photos, or I'd meet people in like school clubs or something who had like transitioned, and they looked really like masculine, and maybe there's some part of me like, wow, I wish people couldn't tell. And I think that's just in the back of my mind. I'm like, oh, it'd just be really easy if people could look at me and understand right away. Or just seeing like other people's like before and after photos, and like, wow, how did they manage that one? It's really unrealistic, actually. Yeah, because before and after, there's a lot that happened in between, right? Yeah, and everybody's different, like
physically as well if you medically transition. Like most people are like very surprised to know I've been on testosterone for like 4 years now. And they're like, wow, your voice hasn't really changed. And that's, of course, because they don't know I was very high-pitched beforehand. It's much deeper than it used to be. But I just mean to say, like, you don't know much about the other person except for what you think is their success. And I think maybe you were relating to that as well. Like, it's not the whole story.
It's not the whole story.
Never the whole story.
And however a person is, whether they're liked or not, like everything they do is not the reason.
No. Yeah. I understood what you meant. I understood what you meant.
Like that wasn't clear at all.
No,
but
I got it. You know what? The hand gestures really helped. It's just, context matters. And I think as far as myself and sort of moving beyond this idea that I have to achieve like the perfect after photo, one of the things I would often end up doing is like asking myself, what would the young Carmen want? You know, I think when we're like 5, 6, 7, when we're like old enough to have opinions, but still maybe naive about expectations, I think that's when you really know who you are. At least that's when I really knew who I was. And so now I go back and like this morning I woke up, I was like, what does tiny Carmen want to wear? Which is how I ended up looking like this. But I just know that my younger self would be so happy to see that I'd found a way to embrace being like a guy and also sort of, you know, putting on the skirt every now and then.
Yeah, very cool. We have an audience.
I know. Hi.
People out the window are like,
I'm really trying not to look at them. I feel really embarrassed.
This is such a weird thing about the Netherlands or Maastricht.
Yes.
That people, like we have our windows open and we're on a main street.
Yeah.
And people walk by and they have no shame that they're just
This
blatantly staring at us
into the house.
in the home. Yeah.
Yeah. Freddie was over at my apartment too, and I also live on the street, and people walk past and the windows at eye level and they just look into my one room apartment and see the whole thing. It's really, it makes you think, right? We can connect this back, you know? Is there something so scary about people seeing where you live? You know? At a certain point, people would walk past my window and be like, oh no, my like kitchen's a little messy or something. And I was like, why do I care? I think that's like real life too. Do you want to be seen? Is there something you don't want people to see? If you're the window, you know, I don't mind that my kitchen's messy.
Nice. Yeah, when I moved to Denmark, like a few years ago when I studied there, I arrived really early in the morning. Yeah. So I didn't have a key, and then I went to the water and I watched the sunrise, and then I got my key, and then I went to my room, and I fell asleep like flat on the bed, like just flat on the bed, because I don't even think I had sheets or anything. Yeah. But I just face on the, and I had these. Then I was also on the first floor, right at the entrance to the like student accommodation, where there's like hundreds of students living. And then like whenever I started meeting people, they're like, oh, I know you. I saw you face plant.
I saw you through the window. Yeah.
for a whole day.
Yeah. You know what? It's interesting because we both have the experience of like traveling a lot, and maybe home is lots of different things in lots of different places. But this is a total jump from the masculinity thing, but we'll come back. And throwing the microphone. You know, it's interesting coming from the Netherlands to Germany. And I don't know if Maastricht is really the Netherlands. Like, I think culturally there might definitely be things that are different. But because you also spent time in Germany. Like, in Germany, like, privacy is really important. Online, like, in your life, you know, you would not have important things in the window that people could see from the street. And then to come to the Netherlands where, I mean, sometimes I feel like people put window displays up just so you can see how their life is like. Yeah. It's like something I'd like to try and embody in myself a little bit, actually, like this just super openness to not just who you are, but where you live and how you live. I don't know, have you noticed, like, the Netherlands compared to other places? And,
This is like the main observation I had about this. Like, I know that in Germany, for instance, people like asked me like, personal space, which is apparently bigger than my conception. They want a lot of personal space.
Oh, yeah.
But like that didn't happen to me in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
I get American vibes a lot of the time in the Netherlands, actually.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know where to go with that.
We can talk maybe a little bit about culture and moving around.
Yeah.
Because that's something we have in common.
That's true.
Yeah.
Maybe before we do that.
Yeah, go ahead.
We'll go back to some of the things we left behind.
Sounds good.
I was wondering, like, because there's a lot of things attached to masculinity.
Some things I wish weren't attached.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, for me, who didn't really think about changing my my gender, I was given this gender and I just accepted it completely.
Yeah.
You know.
Congrats.
Thanks.
Yeah, no worries.
No worries. So I don't really like feel like, well, I don't know. I don't feel like it was my decision as much to be attached to certain things. And I mean, sometimes I still don't like it when people say like, I hate men, you know?
Yeah. I actually, you know what? I have a lot of friends who are like very fierce feminists, and I really don't like when people say that either. Because, like, is it true? I mean, it's absolutism, and even if it's maybe based in some sort of like experience, or you just want to show that, you know, you don't value yourself through the eyes of other guys. I don't like when people say I hate men either, because it seems like a rather unhealthy thing to hate. It seems rather, if your goal is like sort of fighting sexism or showing that you're a feminist, I think there's a lot more productive ways to do it than just hating half the population of the world. That being said, I can understand the direction it's coming from. I just don't think it's a very productive way to think about anything.
There might be better ways.
I think so. Yeah.
But yeah, like for you, how do you deal with these negative connections or connotations?
I'm figuring that out. Like I told you with this podcast, I mean, I have my journal right here. I do a lot of thinking about like being comfortable with a guy or not being comfortable with a guy, and I might not even call myself that in a few years. I don't know what's going to happen. And one thing I have often felt quite uncomfortable with is the fact that I have never really been super close friends with guys growing up. And when I've been in sort of like these sort of like single gender spaces, like I went to a high school that had a very screwed up thing where like physical education class was still split male and female. Yeah, like the Middle Ages. And I just remember being in these like single gender spaces surrounded by guys, and I was just like, this is not it. This is not it. And that was really upsetting to me because I thought maybe that was part of being a guy, was being liked by guys. Speaking of being liked by other people and being seen and like being included in like the masculine things. And I was like not really feeling that. And that was quite upsetting to me when I was, 16, 17, because I thought, well, this is what I am. Why can't they just grab my arm and drag me on the soccer field? I don't know, some super stereotypical, terrible, accepting masculine way of like being approved as a guy by the guys. That's what I wanted. And I've just realized that I actually, since moving to Maastricht and since going to university and being in like jazz conservatory, maybe surrounded by like artsy folks, I have a lot of really great role models for what like being a guy or being a cisgender guy and not being super masculine is like. I have a lot of really great friends here who've shown me a lot about what it means to be like a guy, but also sort of free of this, rowdiness or sportiness or masculinity that's not for me, maybe.
Yeah, it's really hard to escape when you're a kid in school.
Yeah.
You have to be there.
Yeah,
and it's like really exaggerated.
Mm-hmm.
And then some people carry that into adulthood, and other people find their bubbles outside of that.
It's been really, I think the best thing for my sort of self-assuredness when it comes to being a guy is seeing other guys who aren't afraid to just be themselves without worrying about, oh, nail polish, I don't know, or I'm going to dye my hair or something, or I'm going to wear jewelry. That's the best thing for me. And when I was younger, being in Berlin, it really meant the world to me to see people like out on the street or out on the train, just like being super funky,
Yeah.
That made me really, really happy, and it made me feel really safe in a way.
Yeah. And you were in Berlin for a few years, but not
7 years.
Were you there when you were a teenager?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
So when you were in the male space, that was also in Germany.
Yeah. Berlin, it's funny because the city, of course, is super open, and maybe parts of the school I went to were working on it. So It was an interesting juxtaposition for sure. Yeah, because I think when I say I went to high school in Berlin, people are maybe expecting me to have a super, super accepting high school. And there was really amazing teachers and parents there. And there was also a not insignificant chunk of people that made being a trans teenager at this high school very difficult. And so it was good to be in Berlin so I could get out of the high school and out into like Kreuzberg or something, you know, that didn't hurt.
Well, yeah, that's such a great, I mean, I'm sure it has its difficulties, but it's cool to have that option to go like straight from high school to Kreuzberg.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Berlin. Yeah, it's a good place to be free with yourself and to learn who you are. Yeah, I'm grateful for that.
Cool. You also wanted to hear about my perspectives.
I really want to hear about, can I ask you when the first
please.
time you felt like you encountered like a gendered situation was? Like you realized, oh, we're not just all kids playing on the, like, we were talking a few nights ago about like cooties.
Oh, yeah.
Like when did you first sort of realize?
I think I was always aware.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was not oblivious.
Like I never had girlfriends when I was a
Okay.
kid. Yeah. Only boys, I think. Like I don't remember being like 4 years old.
Yeah.
But definitely at 5, I didn't have any girlfriends.
Huh. So different from my fascinating. Yeah.
I always gravitated to the boys to be friends with. I don't remember a single friend who was a girl. I remember one time when I was maybe 7 years old.
Yeah.
There was a girl from my school. Her older sister wanted to have my sister over.
Yeah.
The two older sisters. And then this girl was my age, and she knew me from school. And she invited me over too. And like the two girls came over to pick us up. And I was so humiliated that like I was crying and I wouldn't go. I was holding on to the door, and I don't know if they were like pulling me or like what, but I was like, I'm not going. I'm not going to hang out with these girls. It's so scary. Wow. And actually they eventually, I guess I got over the crying and I went. And I had so much fun.
Yeah.
But it's like my only memory of playing with girls when I was a kid.
That's the like visceral pulling of the doors. That's fascinating. At which point did you feel like you like sort of moved beyond that, Have you?
You're a he, right?
Yeah. Okay. You gotta call my, you are a he. You're a he. Yeah. So far as we know.
No, I don't know. I think, like, I remember when I was like 13 and I wanted to. I was like really into personal growth and self-help and stuff like this. Like I was out on a mission in life.
I was like when I was 13 too, reading like self-help books.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know what I was reading or looking at, but
yeah,
I was getting ideas from somewhere, I guess.
Okay.
But I was like all into this idea of doing things I was afraid of, because I thought like anything I'm afraid of, I don't want to be afraid of it anymore.
Okay.
So I thought like training was like just doing it was the way. So I used to like jump off cliffs, into water.
Okay, that sounds healthy.
But I also used to like push myself to talk to girls.
Ooh, scary.
Yeah, very scary.
I mean, I imagine if you're from your point of view at the time, it might be scary. I don't know.
For me, that was scarier than jumping off a cliff. I mean, they're similar.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was so scary?
I don't know. I just thought that like I didn't know. I just didn't. I thought I felt some kind of misunderstanding. Yeah, like potential judgments and stuff like this. Yeah. I don't
That's
know why. I
interesting.
mean, it's weird because I had a sister and a mom,
Yeah.
and cousins. But I mean, no, I don't. I don't actually. I don't think even my female cousins. I couldn't be friends with at the time. They weren't. I didn't feel like they were very nice.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think we're definitely taught to communicate different. You know, that's one thing I've said a few times is I'm really grateful that I had the experience of learning how to make friends when I was being perceived as a girl, because I think I was allowed a lot more space to just be like honest or emotional. And I think it, like, talking to you and talking to other friends I have who were raised as guys, and like this expectation of friendship sounds really hard sometimes for me, and I'm really grateful that I had like the group of friends I did, who, even though maybe it was a little weird for me sometimes to be friends with girls, knowing that I wasn't totally, in the group, it really, I'm so grateful that I was freed up in a way that I think you get when you're like a young teen, to be friends with other people. I don't know. It could be hard. I don't know if it was hard for you, if it was just like, you're awkward when you're 13 and that was how I was awkward. I don't know, but I'm grateful maybe that I didn't have that experience. Does that sound like a terrible thing to say?
Grateful they didn't have an experience of being a young boy.
Yeah, so happy. It sounds hard.
Yeah. I would say, especially in maybe the countries, well, I don't know what it's like in other countries, but at least like in my family and and like where I grew up, I didn't feel like we talked about certain things, especially when we were kids, like when I was like about emotions and stuff.
Okay.
Or not in a way that I felt like was helpful, and like early teen and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I just remember my dad being like, "So how are you doing?" And I'd be like, "Dad, ask me a better question."
You're like, that's boring. I'm the same as I'm always am.
No, like I can't tell you it unless you ask me the question directly.
No, how are you? Yeah. And of course, it's like the American impulse for me. Whenever someone asks me, I'm like, good, fine.
Good, fine. Yeah.
I'll never forget, we were at the museum one time.
Great.
Yeah, everything's fine. I was at the museum one time with my mom in Berlin, and we asked like the person at the check-in counter, this is some German honesty for you. We were like, how are you doing? And he said, honestly terrible. and afterwards, my mom and I were like, well, I appreciate the self-awareness. I think I'm very quick. How are you doing? I'm fine. I'm fine. Yeah. Terrible. I think going back to transness a little bit, I sometimes feel like I have to prove that it worked, that everything worked out, There's such a like, if you transition and it doesn't work, you're like the living embodiment of regret or something, something so terrible. And after like I had surgery, I felt really like I had to just feel okay, and it had to feel good right away, which no surgery is like that. I felt sick, and I'm really afraid of doctors and stitches, and I couldn't feel like anything here for weeks.
Because they asked you probably over and over again, are you sure? Right?
Yeah.
And you're like, yes, I'm sure, but then you're like, maybe not sure. But
and of course, right afterwards, I was like, that was stupid, because I'm lying sick in bed, and I was like talking about Star Wars right after the anesthesia, and I was just lying there. I was like, someone like, something told me I had to wake up and magically feel everything was right. And so far as like an experience I did not expect to have was, it took me like 2 or 3 months after surgery to feel like, yeah, that's the right thing. And now it's the best thing ever. I refuse to sleep with a shirt on ever again. I'm like shivering under 7 blankets in the winter. I'm like, I'm never sleeping with a shirt on again, because it feels so nice, because I'm finally like aware of myself. But months after like gender affirming surgery, really, really, really hard. And I think we're told that we're supposed to wake up and feel totally fine. And if you feel any inch of regret or maybe like hesitancy, it's bad. And so multiple people would like, how is it feeling? Even my parents say, how is it feeling? And I'm like, it's fine. Yeah, it felt weird and gross and surgery-y.
That's shitty.
Yeah.
That can definitely be carried over into a lot of things, I think, in life. Like maybe things like in work, in life, where you feel like you need to be at a certain level and achieving.
Oh, yeah.
and maybe other people around you, they look fine. I mean, I see a lot of people overworking, over drinking, like over socializing, like over asking of themselves, and then they just completely forget about all the other things they want to do.
Yeah.
And then they're like, sick and struggling, and that's because, I guess, my perspective is the same, that they feel like they should be okay with a certain amount, and they just push themselves into it, and then they're surprised when they get like fucked up.
Or even when something's hard at the beginning of it, like even if it's something you're really supposed to enjoy, like I always think of like when you're jumping on your bike or a hike and you're like starting and it just hurts. It's just hard to move, and it might be the right direction you're supposed to go, but even good things don't always feel like they should in the beginning. And I think this regarding transness and other things, I think it's important to remember that, trial and error, it's okay to be wrong sometimes. And when it comes to surgery, I had a lot of opinions of doctors and therapists and my family and friends and stuff, and it was like a 2 or 3 year process. So obviously I thought about it, because there's a lot of laws right now and thoughts about having these surgeries as a minor, which I did. I'm fine. Most people are, I have my list.
Yeah, hit us with it.
Well, because your podcast is sort of about like labels and moving beyond them. And we've talked about labels of masculinity and maybe sort of like living abroad in the U.S. But I wanted to ask you, like, do you call yourself a podcaster or an artist? Like, where does this come from, and is that something you, like, is that how you identify yourself, or is it just like something you do?
That's a great question for the podcast.
Great question for the podcast.
Wow. What do you
call yourself?
Well,